Just a few disclaimers before I start. I'm not a biologist, a primatologist, or a baboonologist. I'm just a psychologist. And some of what I'm going to say is going to sound totally outlandish, ridiculous, and bizarre. And some of you are going to hate everything I say. Some maybe just on principle. And I'm pretty sure that all of you will simply hate an idea here and there anyway. But for right now, I'm going to ask you just to suspend judgment for 30 to 40 minutes while I share these ideas. Maybe listen with ears of how this might work instead of why this will not work. Because if we change nothing, I fear for our baboons and our village. Don't get stuck thinking about one thing you hate. Just write it down and then tune in again. And I'm going to start by telling you from the get-go, this is not simple. It's not easy. It's going to take time, and the whole village would need to unify behind it if they decided to adopt it. And if it's dead in the water and you think it's not doable, at least we've taken the time to consider one more option we hadn't before. I'm not saying that what I'm about to suggest is the solution. It's merely a spark of an idea that might be a solution. What I suggest might be more of a spark to others cleverer than me with ideas that might work even better than what I'm suggesting. And if we ever adopted this, I'm not interested in this being Carrie's plan. This would have to be the Rooiels whole village plan. We'd have to add all your ideas to it, change the ones we think won't work, because I'm quite sure I don't have all the answers. So I'm hoping that as a village, we like the bare bones, and this is just the beginning of a conversation in which everyone enthusiastically throws ideas into a communal hat, and that we all work towards contributing ideas until we come up with what we as a collective believe would be most workable. The ideas I'm going to share with you about living in true peaceful coexistence could help homeowners too, but it's mainly aimed at making a difference in public spaces and places, and hopefully even construction sites. Because as Bob said in his open letter, nothing is set in stone, and this presentation hopes to shift the discourse from heat to light and hopefully hope. Because if we always do what we've always done, we'll continue to be torn apart. But this game I'm going to propose could also unite us and restore harmony if we pull together. There's only one objective with today's meeting, and that's to see if there are sufficient people who think this idea is worth fleshing out and developing more. Hopefully, this plan will address, as per Bob, the anger and resentment among those villagers who feel not enough has been done. Only we have to be the ones doing the doing. We'd have to take up the reins and make a difference. We can only do that if we participate. And best of all, we could make it fun. I just want our Rooiels to be the Rooiels I remember. And we can only do that maybe if we unite around something like what I think of as the Baboon harmony game. So how many of you, just by a show of hands, would love to live in a Rooiels where baboons still forage, but in the fynbos and around homes rather than accessing human food? I know that I think I speak for everyone that lives in Rooiels, that's what they would like. And that got me thinking, if our baboons have become habituated over the years, can they perhaps become rewilded? And I got to wondering, is there a way we could persuade residents and visits to Rooiels to take part in a game that if us humans get skilled at managing, means that in the long run, humans, baboons, and the environment will all win. So here's the downside of my ideas. Our village will look awful and exactly opposite to a conservancy for a year, maybe even more. And everyone is going to hate that. If we did adopt this plan, we can't moan about this. This is a short-term pain for what I see as a long-term gain. These ideas won't work if we can't bury old hatchets and truly work together as one team for the common good of our baboons, our environment, and our villages. And most importantly, there will be failures. We almost certainly will have to make corrections along the way. We're unlikely to get this right the first time. And when that happens, we'd all have to stop ourselves from being naysayers or chicken littlers and we'd all have to be problem solvers. So let's look at the benefits of all three that I think could win. Our baboons. Our baboons could have a healthier diet, because I don't think there's any baboon expert that thinks that human food is better for their digestive systems. Someone's got some radio going in the background. Could they put themselves on mute? If you could all just mute yourselves. I can hear a squeaking going. So they would have a healthier diet, because I really don't believe that human food is any good for a baboon's digestive system. They wouldn't be harassed, and maybe they would just be able to have their antics appreciated. For the environment, there's natural fynbos seed dispersion, there's aeration of soil as they dig for roots and tubers. They make nutrients available from plants to small animals. And of course, we always want to encourage diversity of wildlife. For humans, if it worked, we wouldn't have baboons accessing our homes, our businesses, cars. We may be able to have a peaceful coexistence with our baboons. Not may, we would be able to have a peaceful coexistence. This unifying game around, it could be a unifying game around which the village can rally and hopefully restored harmony. So the pathway for human baboon coexistence, it meets all of those objectives as set out by Babco. And if it worked, our village could maybe lead the way in true peaceful coexistence with baboons. And I know that it has in the past, and it probably still is way ahead of other areas. But this is a problem in many villages. And if it worked here, maybe other villages could adopt it as well. So we seem to have these two camps: baboon are the problem versus people are the problem. And I want to tell you that I believe neither of those are true. So there we are. I've just pissed off everybody in one little sentence. I really believe that what's our enemy here is our hardened attitudes around whether baboons are the problem or people are the problem. So we may have to soften those and realize that everybody experiences life differently, and that that's okay as we work together to find solutions. The Babco report provides a clear policy for coexistence, relying on home security, waste security, and education. The challenges around implementing these amongst businesses, new residents, builders, and architects, and I would add visitors, are considerable. Now, with my plan, or my ideas, these challenges are not going to go away. But if we adopted this plan, we'd have very visible signs that would make someone ask. And by that, I don't mean signposts. I just mean something very visible that people could see. So the Babco findings on peaceful coexistence were that majority of respondents support coexistence with baboons. 83% said baboons should be free to forage on the fynbos of Rooiels. 77% of the troop said that the troop is part of Rooiels and needs to be accepted and respected. And my ideas address both of these, plus the residents who said that baboons are problematic, which was 33%. The underlying assumptions on the ideas that I'm presenting are based on well-researched and documented scientific literature. The assumptions: baboons are extremely intelligent. They learn new behaviors quickly. Learning happens in steps and becomes generalized. So for example, baboons learn that bags have food. So if they see a bag in a car, they've seen humans open car doors, they start trying car doors. And then when they find that it has food in it, then they start breaking more car doors to get in. So it just happens in generalized steps. But the one thing as well is that troop adoption is speedy. So once one baboon in the troop, I mean, they really are like humans, is adopted, it spreads very quickly amongst the whole troop. And I think we can use that to our advantage. So with favorable results, you see an increase in that behavior. And with unfavorable results, you see a decrease and a lessening of that behavior. And troops learn to adapt and change behavior as the environment changes. Our focus is going to be on changing how our baboons perceive and react to a slightly different environment, a changed environment. It's environmental changes as well as our human behaviors that have led to habituation of our baboons. And thus to change them has to start with how we manage ourselves in order to rewild them. And I don't think that's news to anybody. So there are known ways of changing animal behaviors that can lead to the extinction of unwanted behaviors, which are accessing homes, businesses and cars, rummaging through baggage, garbage, taking bags, snatching food. And remember, these aren't natural actions. I said are, but these aren't the natural actions of baboons in the wild. Their natural actions are foraging. So as Ali says, in the recent discussion, we've lined our bin with netting so the baboon cannot pull anything through the slats and put a heavy stone in. It's working well. They simply ignore the dustbin now. So what Ali did was to change the environment of her baboon bin, and they tried it a few times, learned there was no reward. And so that behavior, they don't try it anymore because that behavior becomes extinct. And that's more or less what I'm going to be talking to you about. And I can't remember if it was Graham Lundy or Graham, the guy with the claws, who told me that after a successful hit, they'll come back something like 26 days in a row to try it. But if their efforts are consistently met with no reward, then they leave those homes alone. And I think that for the most part, that is absolutely true. I remember after having a hit, they came and tried every door, it seemed like for every day. And then it got to a point where they didn't do that anymore. They would come and forage on the lawn, they would forage in the fynbos, but they actually no longer tried the doors except very sporadically. So there are also known ways of changing animal behavior that can promote desired behavior, which is foraging in the fynbos, lawns on insects. And these are the natural actions of baboons in the wild. So rewilding our baboons' behavior depend on us humans managing our environment differently through three major things: shaping, paired stimuli, and aversion, and I'm going to discuss each of those in turn. Shaping. So animals learn complex behaviors through shaping, and each step process is called an approximation. Behavior can be changed in small successive steps towards the final goal of the desired behavior. If an unwanted behavior is not reinforced over time, it decreases until eventually it's extinguished altogether. Like those baboons won't try Ali's to overturn her bin anymore. Paired stimuli. I'm sure you've all heard of the Russian behaviorist Ivan Pavlov, who noticed that the smell of meat made his dogs drool. He started to ring a bell just before introducing the meal. After repeating this several times, Pavlov rang the bell without introducing the meat. The dogs still drooled, but merely upon hearing the bell. They'd learned to pair the sound of the bell with the smell of food, and it no longer even took food for them to drool. Aversion. When a behavior that was once met with a reward is met with something aversive or fearful, animals learn avoidance, and that behavior can be transmitted through a herd or a troop very quickly. So central to this idea that I have is that baboons see color the same way humans do. They're trichromatic. They've got sharp eyes, and you'll know this if you've lived in Rooiels for any length of time. They post lookouts who from far distances readily spot human behaviors and patterns of possible reward. We can tap into these natural attributes, implement well-known ways of changing animal behavior so that baboons, Rooielses, and the environment all win. My ideas include a stepped approach in line with approximation and learning and adopting ideas over time and in 3 phases, probably over a year. Remember, it's not going to be easy because it relies on buy-in by all, non-blaming, non-sharing, and consistency. And this is just the bare bones. Phase 1, shaping through association, beginning to lessen unwanted behavior. Remember, unfavorable results equals a decrease in behavior. Let's say we teach our baboons that the color yellow is never associated with a food reward. Now, I know that everybody's going to go, yellow stands out. It's a horrible color to have in a naturescape. And I'm going to agree with that. But it does have some advantages. It's easy for lookout baboons to spot. And once they start associating it with something, then maybe to warn the troop. However, I also want to say, I'm not stuck on the color yellow. The villagers can come up with any color that they think might work in this situation. So this is the initial Rooiels Baboon Harmony Toolkit, as I would call it. So first of all, we'd have to get some yellow bags. So maybe our shops and our businesses could provide yellow bags. Maybe we could even have something like Loving Our Baboons printed on them, some yellow tape and some yellow ribbon. So let's say the overall goal as a village was that baboons learned that the color yellow was never associated with food, ever. And instead, yellow became something that baboons would actively avoid. In other words, after a while, the goal would be that any visitor, contractor, or resident could take a yellow cooler box onto the beach, walk home with a yellow bag in their hand, leave a yellow bag in the car, put a yellow border around a window, patio, construction site, wind something yellow around your arm so you could walk carrying bags from the store. And baboons would avoid them because they had learned there was no food reward, but possibly a nasty surprise. Shaping to decrease behavior. So for example, what if we had a concerted effort at using yellow bags over a period of months with the idea that baboons would increasingly never find any food in a yellow bag? So we had brochures, QR codes, maybe a sign on the men's toilet about our yellow bag project. And yellow bags for Wimpy at the village store, put all non-food items in a yellow bag only. Maybe even plant yellow bags close to municipal bins that never have food in them. So as I said, the village would look awful. I acknowledge that. But remember, short-term pain for long-term gain. Maybe construction workers could cordon off initially small areas using yellow and black tape around where they were working, and initially leaving a few non-food yellow bags around inside the cordoned off areas. Over time, as baboons learned that these cordoned off areas didn't have food, these cordoned off areas could be expanded so that eventually a whole building site could be cordoned off with yellow and black tape. Then let's look at phase 2, where we take paired stimuli and aversion. So in other words, there starts becoming some unfavorable results, which then decrease and lessen behavior. So let's say that our baboons learn that the color yellow is associated with an environment stimuli they fear. One thing that baboons fear naturally is snakes. By now, they've already started to lose interest in anything bags that are yellow, but never yield a food reward. And now we up the game. We introduce fake snakes and snake images printed on our yellow bags. So every contractor and household had a few fake snakes, or a couple of plastic snakes they left lying next to something yellow in their more easily accessible places like window ledges or cars, and just moved them now and again. Because remember, baboons are clever. They'll soon learn that if a snake just stays stationary in one place, that it's nothing to fear. Or have you any seen those wooden snakes? They're so clever. If you pick them up by the tail, they look like they're moving. So if a contractor had one of those wooden snakes on site, that if a baboon came across the yellow line, they could pick up one or two of these wooden snakes and just hold them. They look incredibly realistic because they actually move. So let's then look at our expanded baboon harmony toolkit, which would include fake snakes and snakes printed on our bags. And maybe we could even walk back from the village store or restaurants with yellow bags and a yellow plastic snake around our arm, or hold out those wooden ones, as I said. And what if we started covering our public municipal garbage containers in yellow with a snake on them, and had fun making it appear as if there were always snakes around places like municipal bins, the village shop, and restaurants? By finding a way to make snake noises, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but also by getting a few remote controlled snakes that every now and again, if somebody's alerting us that the troop is coming to the town, that we could actually remotely control a snake that then moved past those businesses, etc. Now, finding a way to make snake noises. there, if you go to, there's a local place called Steigerwaldje Nature Reserve, where you can press a button that makes a bird sound. So it's got the bird's name and it makes a bird sound. What would happen if we could put those buttons somewhere on our municipal bins so that when baboons try and access them, what they access as well is the noise of a snake hissing that they are scared of. So those are all ways that I think we could build in liveness into these snakes. I mean, we could even put them on a fishing line and have someone in the bushes with a little fishing rod, which I know sounds outlandish and like, but imagine what fun you could have pretending that there's a live snake, which is, going to be part of creating harmony in the long term with our baboons. So as somewhere on the website, I also found that planting of fynbos, that baboon, one of my other suggestions is that we actually plant more fynbos around the perimeter of Rooiels, and we encourage foraging there. So, fynbos is something that's disappearing in many of their habitats, and Rooiels is a fynbos rich environment, partly because of the baboons that visit and disperse seeds. But this was somewhere on the website. Rooiels is unique in the Western Cape as a community committed to finding ways of supporting efforts to ensure that the village remains open to wildlife, including baboons. This reduces the costs of artificial protection measures, of human monitors, fences, or other costly interventions to minimize human-baboon conflict. Because they are free to roam, the baboons are able to access coastal fynbos, which is increasingly limited and is a necessary part of their feeding regimes and dispersing fynbos seed. This commitment clearly demonstrates the unique attitude of Rooiels towards nature, ensuring that residents and visitors understand and comply with additional measures to reduce conflict. So, for example, and I don't know if it's permissible to plant more fynbos in the Rooiels Nature Reserve, but I know that one of the bones of contention is the pathway, and part of it is the railing. So what happens if we planted rich fynbos so that it not only hid the railing, but that it would draw baboons more to that area, which is a perfect area for them to forage. So, and maybe along with doing hacks, we could even plant more fynbos they particularly love. And it doesn't have to be expensive. I don't know how many of you remember that my mom's Lynn Harris, by the way, had a nursery where she used to cultivate little seedlings to plant in the garden and to share amongst people for fynbos. So if we made them rich in the CBD area, in those gardens that have been rewilded, but if we planted them away from where we get the most guests, so actually that perhaps wouldn't be a good idea to plant richness, but along areas where we would really like to encourage the baboons to forage. And then what if we started putting out temporarily, say, pink cloths around fynbos areas that they particularly love, or an area where that's rich in insects or tubers they love. As I said, it's going to make the village look awful. But what happens is that they start associating one color with reward, food, and another color with a lack of reward, no food. Okay, phase 3, sporadic aversion. And this is where half of you are going to hate me the most for suggesting this. But bear with me. Baboons, and like humans, don't like uncertainty. If there's something in the environment to fear, and if they're not sure when that fear will be there, they tend to avoid the area and thus protect their troop from potential harm. So with this phase, we actually start introducing real aversion to extinct behavior. So by now, they should be pretty used to yellow never yielding a reward, and they've become hyper-vigilant about encountering something they naturally fear, snakes. What if we then up the game again and introduced a surprising and sporadic real fear? So I want to introduce you to Dr. Renee Ksudek, who works at the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. And her area of focus has been managing human-wildlife conflicts in Central and Southern Africa, mainly around villages and crops. and she works for, as I said, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, and they are developing what they call a human-wildlife conflict mitigation toolkit. And one of the things in it that they suggest, don't all yell at once, you're going to hate this idea, is got baboons in your crop, offer them a snake sandwich. So this is a live snake sandwich where they remove the center from a loaf of bread and hide a live snake inside. They, baboons, also have good memories. Renee Xudek at the FAA says, a baboon frightened by a snake sandwich will probably not come back. Experiences like these quickly lead to an easily transmitted and quickly transmitted and adopted message within the troop. Yellow, beware, danger. And we have plenty of snakes and snake catchers in our village. So we could take those snakes and just sporadically put them in high volume areas like the bins, and this has to happen very seldom. It's not like this happens every day, but if we find a snake, it would be a good opportunity to put one in a visible place in a yellow bag again, just because it transmits amongst the troop. And for those of you who think, well, this might harm a baboon, I don't know, it may. It is a natural enemy of theirs. But again, I'm thinking about long-term, short-term pain for long-term gain and harmony. So does this plan have hurdles and challenges? Absolutely. Visitors, contractors, follow through of villages, consistencies. Baboons are so smart, they will quickly learn that static snakes can't harm them. And even if this plan worked and we decided to adopt it and flesh it out and build it up more, it is absolutely likely to need periodic reinforcing. One of the other hurdles is the 2 visiting males that Bob referred to in his open letter from the Pringle Bay troop and the Gordons Bay troop, because if they come in and they don't know the rules of the game, our baboons watch them as well. And so if they go and find food in a yellow bag, because the idea is that you should be able to eventually carry food in a yellow bag, our baboons see that and then will copy it. So I want to open it up. Please unmute yourselves for questions, comments, concerns. And I also just wanted to mention that if we like this idea and decided it was worth working towards, things like bags, fake snakes, yellow tapes, remote controlled, we may need someone to drive the program, although I'm really happy to meet and, drive it in this way. The grants we could maybe get, maybe some rarer funds, maybe private contributions. So I'm going to stop screen share. There is a message in the chat. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so just thoughts, comments. I mean, is it dead in the water? Is it such a stupid idea that we should not even consider it? Because I'm not invested in having these ideas adopted. I'm invested in trying to create harmony in a village and live in real peaceful coexistence with our baboons. And it's a big ask. It's a big ask of a village that is already divided. But maybe it could be the thing that unifies us. Anyone got a question or a comment? So a question from Fiona, what percentage of you would consider enough buying? Or what percentage would I consider enough buying? I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm not an animal expert, but I would say that you've got to have a very high percentage of buying. And not just because, that it takes a whole village. I do think it's going to take a whole village to rewild our baboons. But this is something that's real, it's actionable. And I know another half of people are going to hate it when I say this, but these are all methods that are very successfully used in circuses to train animals. Now, we're trying to retrain our animals to rewild them, so that the aim is different. But, these are well-documented scientific ideas. Thanks for the question, though. Any other questions? You're welcome to ask them in the chat. Can I perhaps have just via the chat, can you just give me a yes worth pursuing or no, dead in the water? At least then we'll have some idea of whether it's even worth looking at further. So Di says, yep, she thinks it's worth looking at further. Maggie, Bruce, Moran. That's true, Vili. Some people have a phobia of snakes and won't be able to enjoy the village. That is another hurdle that I hadn't thought about, but you're quite right. And again, you know, it may be short-term pain for long-term gain. I don't know. So Fiona said yes, and I saw Mary had a hand up. How many of you would like me to post this video and see if there's any more buying in other areas? Can I just have a show of hand by that? Because, you know, I don't want to waste people's time by posting a video if I don't want to waste people's time. This is just an idea, and I think we can work. So are there more people that would like it posted?
Carrie, can I just say, first off, thank you for all the work that you've put into this. Very interesting ideas. But secondly, I think it's something that you need to digest and think about. It's also very broad. So are we talking about bins? Are we talking about home invasions? Are we talking about visitors feeding baboons? So I also think perhaps it's something that is worthwhile thinking about. How do you narrow it and maybe think about running a pilot or something which would be something that people can get on board, rather than saying everything has to be resolved and here's the full gamut of things that we could, the ways we could deploy to try and do it, to is there something that everyone can agree on that will be good for the baboons and good for us, and we could try it as a test. So I need to just think over that for a little bit.
Claire, I think that's an excellent idea. I think to try a small program and run a pilot program, I think would be a great idea. You know, because that way we could see, you know, does it work in a small limited area? Is it worth trying to expand out? And, you know, I have tried to, I've reached out to Barbara Pearson. I've reached out to many experts to try and see what they think of this plan. Getting feedback has been extremely challenging. And I get it, you know, it's a lot to take in. And you're right, it is very broad and very general. So, you know, when I've been thinking about this, I've been thinking about how do we, because for me, yes, you know, I think, you know, at 206, we've invested in all sorts of things to live in peaceful coexistence with our baboons. So, you know, our home doesn't often get hit. So for me, it's also more about public spaces. I don't want kids to be frightened of walking from the store in case a baboon snatches something from their hand. So, you know, for me, it's about how do we restore peace and harmony in our public spaces as well. Fiona, as far as I know, this idea has not, with the yellow or the colors, has not been tried in other areas. I do know that snake sandwiches are employed in areas, in rural villages where they have conflict, and those have apparently worked very well. Let me just go back in the chat here. Okay, I'd happily carry a snake around, says Vili, but what about the cruelty towards snakes? You know, as I said, there is no simple and easy solution. And yep, that's another thing we have to bear in mind. You know, I don't know if enough snakes would be harmed. I mean, even one snake being harmed, even one baboon being harmed is always too much. I get that. But sometimes there has to be a price to pay for the safety of snakes overall and the baboons overall. So yeah, not an easy question to answer. But I'm glad you asked it. Thank you.
So, Carrie, first of all, I also just want to say thanks for all this hard work you've put in. It's amazing. You spent a lot of time doing that. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's definitely worth pursuing, and maybe we should just start with just the yellow color thing before we go further into the snake issue, because I think that is a huge step forward. And yes, there are snake handlers in the village, but not that many, and not many people like to work with snakes. So yeah, it's just so maybe plastic or whatever, but that we start with one thing, just the first thing, like the color. That makes sense to me anyway. But yeah, thanks, Gary.
Thank you very much. So here's a suggestion that I've got. What would it be like if we put up, had another meeting the same time next week? And what I would do between now and next week is put together a proposal for a small pilot program, so that we could see if just a small pilot program just based on color makes any difference at all. And maybe I see Zandra's on, and I'm not sure, I don't think Wimpy's on. But maybe I'm thinking if we started somewhere in a public area, which isn't to say that some of you can't experiment with yellow, in your homes. And also, is yellow a color that's even acceptable to the village? It's very bright in the naturescape, so it has the advantage baboons can see it. But my gosh, the village is going to look awful, so there's also that to take into consideration. And I'm not stuck on the color yellow. I just chose it because it's so visible and baboons can see it easily, and anything like that, I think, aids learning. So how many of you would be prepared to attend a meeting same time next week, just with the idea of discussing a small pilot study that we could try? That's a good idea. Perhaps if you can have a few homeowners adjacent to each other, you can try this and see if there are any visible differences. I love that idea. Are there any of you that are on the call that are adjacent to each other that would be prepared to band together and try it? Okay, Elba, you said, and the yellow bags. What, did you have something more you wanted to add about the yellow bags? Yeah, so baboons see color the same way that we do. So they see yellow with the same kind of brightness.
Sorry, Corey, it's Albie here. I'm driving. That's why I'm starting to type and talk. So I think because we are at the entrance, I will just check in with Sandra and Eileen and them. We already have part of a yellow in our logo, so we would be happy to do that together with Reza and Wimpy right next to each other. Okay. So that's from my side. Go ahead. I think that's a very good idea. And I also just want to add something. A friend of my brother said the other day they tied rubber snakes with a fish line within a dustbin to the dustbin's lid. Mm-hmm. So when the baboons lift the dustbin, this rubber snake is just there. It looks like a real thing.
Brilliant idea.
I'm not sure what area they were, but that apparently worked well. So I love your idea. And I think it would be nice if we can post this video on the village group as well. So I think many people would like to join, but some might have family matters to attend to, or it's just Sunday. So I think it will be good if you can post this on our village group as well. And thank you for your work. I love it.
You're welcome. So here's what I'm going to suggest then. I will post this on the village group. If you can, all of you who think it's a good idea, if you can spread the word so that as many people as possible watch it, and that we get as many as people as possible to come to the next meeting, which will probably be shorter. And we'll then try a pilot program. And if any of you are willing to be a part of the pilot program, just if you can maybe WhatsApp me so that I've got a list of you, because then I can specifically, chat to you behind the scenes as well, so that we can come up with something that works. But, Elba, your idea of the snakes and the lids, you see, that's exactly what I mean by this is a bare bones idea. And there are people that are way cleverer than me, they've got all these ideas. We've got such a richness of ideas in Rooiels. And I truly think that if we could make this work and we could make it into something that was fun, something that the entire village banded around, it could really be a unifying force in a village that's terribly divided, and which honestly just breaks my heart. I hate seeing Rooiels this way. Sorry. Okay, so next steps in, I'm going to set up a meeting same time next week. You're going to WhatsApp me behind the scenes if you would like to take a part in a pilot program. And we'll start small and just monitor how it goes.